Well, I think in the first place it did not come as a complete surprise after events of the last few days.
In all, at least 18 European military attachés and staff envoys, including 11 French and 4 Italians, were ordered out in retaliation for the ouster of Iraqi military attachés and their dependents from European countries last week. The escalation in the diplomatic war comes just hours after the ruling Revolutionary Command, led by President Saddam Hussein, issued a stern communique interrupting regular TV programming, vowing no retreat from Kuwait. There will be no wavering or change in our objective on our march towards victory, the statement said. There is not a single chance for any retreat. And in even more bellicose terms today, Iraq's information minister warned the West about starting a war.
All the land in Saudi Arabia that the American forces there, we will attack it. So it will be a long war and not a short war.
On the streets, emotions remained heated. I'm not afraid, he says. I have 5 sons at the front now, and I will volunteer also to fight. Today's developments hardened the Iraqi line even further. And that, as one Western diplomat put it, seems bizarre considering the powerful military and diplomatic pressure against this country. Ed Rabel, NBC News, Baghdad.
In response to all of this, President Bush was restrained, but he did make it clear that there are conditions that he will not accept. NBC's Jim Miklaszewski is at the White House tonight. Jim?
Tom, though he denies it, President Bush sounded today as if he were preparing the American people and Iraq for possible war. On his way to a weekend at Camp David, President Bush issued a stern warning to Iraq that any Iraqi support for terrorism would have serious personal consequences for Saddam Hussein.
We hold Saddam Hussein responsible if there is any terrorist act against us.
The president tried to downplay increasing talk of war, but would not rule out the possibility the U.S. would fire the first shot to protect American lives. And in an earlier meeting at the White House, President Bush advised congressional leaders that the U.S. could soon find itself in a shooting war with Iraq. Last night, Saddam Hussein predicted a long, drawn-out war. Bush dismissed the speech not as a threat, but as an act of desperation.
I don't think he's ratcheting up. I think he's hunkering down. But as these economic sanctions work, I expect you might see more heated rhetoric from him.
Bush has no problem with a demand that Saddam Hussein be permitted to address the American people in a 90-minute taped speech. But he joked that nobody could possibly stay awake.
That'll finish him off in the United States. I can't speak for the rest of the world.
President Bush indicates that he'd like to give economic sanctions time to work against Iraq. But he also says that as Iraq dismantles Kuwait, it appears that time may be running out. Tom?
Thank you, Jim. Well, the politics of the Persian Gulf showdown have created some curious new alliances. Not all of the old assumptions about the Middle East have changed, it turns out. NBC's Andrea Mitchell is on Capitol Hill now with the story of what's going on with the proposed arms deal with the Saudis. Andrea, what's the latest?
Well, Tom, not even the deployment of American soldiers to the Persian Gulf is enough to guarantee congressional approval of a new arms sale to the Saudis, not when it is the biggest arms sale in U.S. history. Saudi Ambassador Prince Bandar has been on Capitol Hill all week, today lobbying the Senate Intelligence Committee.
These weapons are not toys. They cost billions of dollars. We prefer to recycle those billions of dollars into the United States economy.
Hardly toys. More than $20 billion of the latest high-tech U.S. weapons. M1 tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, F-15 fighter jets, Patriot anti-aircraft missiles.
A $21 billion arms package would be trying to stuff basically the entire Saudi wish list behind the fig leaf of this current crisis.
Even the new reality of Saudi and American soldiers working side by side is not enough to quiet concerns of Israel's supporters in Congress. Congressional leaders told the president today he may have to scale back the sale or delay some of the weapons.
I think that we should be concerned about giving the Saudis certain kinds of offensive weapons that could be used against Israel at some day in the future.
While not backing down, the president may have to be flexible.
I think there's a universal feeling that we should go forward. We're willing to discuss the details of the package with them.
Details such as selling the Saudis TOW missiles and tanks now, weapons they need right away, but delaying the delivery of the advanced fighter jets. And as Defense Secretary Cheney promised Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Aarons this week, providing some new aid to Israel.
The report of the death of this quote-unquote package are greatly exaggerated.
A fight between Congress and the White House over the Saudi arms sale would be the worst signal to send right now to Saddam Hussein. So tonight, the White House has announced a compromise. They will sell the arms to the Saudis, but in two phases. But still, the biggest arms sale in U.S. history. Tom?
Thank you, Andrea. By the way, all of this tough talk today from Saddam Hussein drove oil prices even higher. They are now near their highest point in 9 years. Some oil experts say they would come down sharply if oil companies and governments weren't hoarding oil supplies.
My name is Cedric Mills. I'm from Newark, New Jersey. I'd like to say hi, Mom. Hi to everybody back in San Diego. Dawn and everybody, take care. I'll be home soon.
There is a highly unusual custody battle tonight in Southern California involving a baby born to a surrogate mother who did nothing more than carry the child. Late today, a judge awarded custody for now to the biological parents. The surrogate will have the right to visit, however. NBC's Don Oliver.
Last January, 29-year-old Anna Johnson contracted to bear a child for Mark and Crispina Calvert. She was implanted with an embryo formed from the sperm and egg of Mr. and Mrs. Calvert. She was to be paid $10,000. Along the way, she decided the Calverts had lost interest, and she went on national talk shows to say they failed to give her the financial and emotional support she needed.
I also have a right to change my mind, and I decided not to give my son up for adoption.
When the 6-pound, 10-ounce baby boy was born prematurely this week, Johnson modified her demand.
Anna believes that there should be a shared parenting plan.
But the Calverts were adamant.
I mean, this is our baby. It's genetically our baby. I cannot foresee that anything would be just for our child than to be placed in our environment.
This case differs from other surrogate controversies in that Anna Johnson just provided her womb as a place for someone else's baby to grow. Some experts believe she has no more right to the child than an incubator would.
I think the kind of role that she's played is really to provide an environment in which it's possible to bring a baby to term. In some ways, she's providing an artificial environment.
The American Bar Association believes the case should change the old common law that a child born of a woman belongs to the woman.
It's not now legitimate because of the technology that we have that says that a child born of a woman is not necessarily her child.
Anna Johnson's attorney said she did not want the baby to go to a foster home and agreed this afternoon that he should go with the Calverts until a temporary custody hearing next week. The Calverts will again seek sole custody. Don Oliver, NBC News, Los Angeles.
President Bush's son Neil was slapped with a $200 million lawsuit today, along with other officers of the bankrupt Silverado Savings and Loan. Federal regulators accused Bush and the others of gross negligence in the collapse of the Colorado S&L. It cost taxpayers $1 billion. In Los Angeles, meanwhile, Charles Keating, best known of the savings and loan operators in trouble, was denied a reduction of his $5 million bail. The judge said that he was concerned that Keating would flee. He's been in jail since he was arrested Tuesday, charged with fraud. Overall, just how well have prosecutors done in going after the savings and loan bad guys? We get a scorecard tonight from NBC's James Polk.
This is what the savings and loan scandal looks like. Empty concrete slabs, weeds, a wasteland where once a townhouse project was planned.
Unbelievable waste.
This tape, made for regulators in '84, shows that strip of projects near Dallas. The loans came from Empire Savings, the first big fraud case. After 6 years, a hung jury, no new trial date, prosecutors have yet to send the top men in this case to jail.
It says that something is terribly, terribly wrong with the process.
There are two ways to keep score in this scandal. The Justice Department lists more than 300 convictions. But in the biggest cases, the S&Ls which lost $1 billion or more, no owner has been sentenced to prison. So far, most have not been charged.
The owners who are smart take pains not to sign the paperwork. They do it in face-to-face meetings. They do it with a handshake. You have to climb over bodies of other insiders to get to the top people.
two big cases will go to trial soon. Don Dixon at Vernon Savings, Ed McBurney at Sunbelt, the wild one people called Gunbelt. Regulators say Sunbelt made loans so bad they were called cash for trash. And lawsuits say some of the money, like this fat check, may have gone to McBurney. But the prosecution case against McBurney is much more narrow, based on one back-scratching deal with another S&L.
We have to be lean and to the point.
But some question whether prosecutors can keep up with all the crooks.
In terms of the overall problem, I think they've been out-hustled, overmatched, and outmaneuvered.
If you loot and abuse your institution, and the money is big enough, chances are nothing will ever happen to you.
Maybe not. Investigations take time. This may be only the beginning.
Clearly, we're not halfway.
You're not yet halfway.
I don't believe that we're halfway through the number of prosecutions that we're going to have.
This savings and loan mess is so big that no matter how many white-collar thieves get sent away, no matter how long they're locked up, the public will still be paying for this long after they're out. James Polk, NBC News, Dallas.
And these two high rollers, Donald Trump and Leona Helmsley, are going after each other's throats in Playboy magazine. First, he called her a vicious, horrible woman. Now she's calling him a liar and a skunk, adding, "I wouldn't believe Donald Trump if his tongue was notarized." There still is no deal in sight on reducing the deficit as this budget battle drags on in Washington. Democrats and Republicans agreed to resume their budget summit Sunday night. Meanwhile, the deficit is not being helped by the fact that many U.S. subsidiaries of foreign companies are evading taxes in this country. NBC's Diana Karicki reports that this has gotten the attention of Congress now.
If we're going to be called upon, not only by the administration, but by our summiteers, to increase taxes, I'll be damned if I'm going to do it while billions of dollars are floating overseas.
Congress is mad, and it's not going to take it anymore. A House subcommittee just investigated 10 years of tax avoidance by American subsidiaries of foreign companies. It found more than half of them paid no income tax. Japanese companies are among the worst offenders. The scheme is called transfer pricing. This is one way it can work. Say a Japanese company builds a car for $5,000. It sells the car to its own U.S. subsidiary at an artificially inflated price of $9,000. The parent just made a $4,000 profit. An American consumer buys the car for $10,000. The net result for the U.S. subsidiary, after other costs, is little or no profit, and little or no tax bill. But the Japanese parent still has that $4,000, and no taxes due to the U.S. Treasury. The IRS reportedly is investigating these companies for illegal transfer pricing. The list reads like a who's who of Japan's biggest corporate names. A former employee of Toshiba said that company's pricing in the U.S. did not add up.
The book price was just some arbitrary figure that they came up with, I guess, to keep their taxes down. The system taken in on trade, whatever it was sold for was all profit. And yet the way they accounted for it, only half of it was shown as profit. The other half was arbitrarily called cost, and there were no costs associated with it.
Japanese sales in the U.S. skyrocketed in the mid-'80s, but their declared income, on which they paid taxes, plummeted.
The average working man and woman in the state of Alabama paid more income tax over the last 5 years than multinational corporations. Is that a fact or not?
There are certainly circumstances that we're aware of where there has been little or no tax payment over a substantial period of years.
So the answer to that is yes.
Well, that'd be one way to put it.
How have some Japanese companies been able to avoid U.S. tax payments? One reason is the administration's reluctance to alienate the Japanese.
It's kind of been a marriage of convenience. On the one hand, our people here have been worried that we can sell our bonds to often foreign investors, Japanese investors in many cases, and in return for that, there's kind of a wink that we won't really enforce our tax laws.
This kind of sweetheart deal just goes to show how dependent the United States has become on Japanese money. Americans must ask whether we want Japanese investors to buy bonds to support the budget deficit or pay taxes to reduce it. Diana Karicki, NBC News, New York.
And this one defies many of our stereotypes. There's a new survey indicating that American students rate their schools higher than do students in Japan. And U.S. students are optimistic about public schools. Many more of them are studying computer science and business courses than students in Japan. The late David Acker was the Florida dentist believed to have infected a young woman with AIDS while extracting 2 of her teeth. Today, Florida health officials revealed 2 more of his patients are infected with the AIDS virus. They say that further studies will be needed before they know for sure if these people were infected by the dentist. Officials want to test hundreds of other patients. Today is POW MIA Recognition Day. Family, friends, and country honor the American prisoners of war and those missing in action in Vietnam. And as NBC's Robert Hager reports, these ceremonies came as more American military troops are stationed in harm's way.
Harold William Kroski and 2,300 more. There are no remains beneath these stones, only fallen leaves. The names memorialized here at Arlington National Cemetery and elsewhere are America's missing in action. Just today, remains of 4 more left Hawaii en route home from Laos. Among them, the son of Joe and Lawrence Hatley of Stanley County, North Carolina. Joel Hatley was never heard from after his helicopter went down 2 decades ago. Now, Mrs. Hatley thinks of another generation of parents.
I feel real strongly for all the people that are sending their sons to Saudi Arabia now, because we know how they feel, and we just pray that they'll all come back safe.
A small but vocal minority within MIA groups believes there are still hundreds of prisoners alive in Southeast Asia. Writer Monica Jensen Stevenson has a new book about that.
After all these years, the families, the American people, have the right to know what information the U.S. government has on these prisoners. And anyone who has tried to get at that material has been harassed and intimidated.
But most MIA groups think the U.S. government is doing what it can. A fact touched on at a Pentagon ceremony today by General John Vesey.
We will not forget you. The search goes on. It goes on today while we speak.
But most of the waiting graves will remain forever empty. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
I'll be back in a moment with memories of Hugo 1 year later. It was just a year ago tonight that Hurricane Hugo stormed ashore along the South Carolina coast. In the Charleston area, Hugo fulfilled its forecast as a killer of people, a destroyer of property and dreams. NBC's Kenley Jones reports tonight on the bad memories and the better times now.
It was a terrifying night, and I don't want her to have to relive that every time the skies get dark.
Evelyn Cooper is talking about her 20-year-old daughter, Melissa. She has sought counseling for her because of her lingering fright from the night Hugo blew the roof off the family's trailer home, and they all thought they were going to die.
Anytime the sky gets dark or the wind starts blowing, she gets terrified. She goes all to pieces.
Once that wind starts, I can't deal with it.
Basically, these people are not crazy. They're not mentally ill. They're people dealing with a significantly stressful event in their lives, and they need to find ways to work that out.
Therapists like Kathy Joyner have counseled more than 5,000 stress victims. Nobody knows how many there really are, trying to get them to talk about their Hugo experiences. 11-year-old Sonia Gardner was trapped in the McClellanville cafeteria as the tidal surge rose.
Time we got up on the stage, it was to my neck, and if we didn't get up on the stage, I believe I would have died, because it was over. It would have been over my head.
Yeah. What were you thinking when that was happening to you?
That we all were going to die.
A lot of people thought they were going to die that night as Hugo swept ashore. When daylight revealed the extent of the damage, some said they almost wished they had been lost in the storm. Everything else was.
Look at that. That's one of my old plates.
I've not learned to deal with it, and I wonder if I ever will.
Red Killing and his wife Allison have rebuilt their waterfront home near McClellanville. She has a box of small items plucked from the rubble left by Hugo. But treasured items like family photographs were gone with the wind and the water.
You don't get to choose and pick a whole lot about what you can salvage. You just take what you can get.
Her husband was so distraught over Hugo, he had to quit his job.
For a long time, it was just your total focus and your total life was Hugo.
Gradually, the destruction caused by Hugo is disappearing here in Charleston and along the coast. But when all the repairs have been completed, when all the destroyed houses have been rebuilt, when all the physical scars left by Hugo have been removed, the emotional scars will remain for Melissa and Sonia and the Kellings and for countless others whose names we may never know. Kenley Jones, NBC News, Charleston, South Carolina.
That's nightly news for this Friday night. I'm Tom Brokaw. Gary Cutley will be here tomorrow night. I'll see you again on Monday.
Give me a